Good afternoon, everyone. Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV. Thanks for joining us, and you may even be watching us live. It's a live show if you happen to be tuning in right now. But again, thanks for joining us as we get ever closer to the November 3rd general election. We're continuing with another one of a series of shows involving legislative candidates in Franklin County involved in contested races. And happy to have all three candidates running in the Franklin 4 House District. That's the two-member district covering Swanton and Sheldon. And on hand today, veteran Republican Representative Brian Savage of Swanton. Brian, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for coming on. Bob Norris, Franklin County's former longtime sheriff, a Republican candidate from Sheldon. Bob, and Nick Brousseau, Democratic candidate from Swanton. Nick, you took a shot at this 2 years ago. And you're back at it, correct?
Yes, I am.
And was it an easy decision to take another shot at this? Or?
Yeah, very easy decision. Yeah. I thought I got in late last time, and I thought I did pretty well vote-wise. Got over 1,000 votes. After I got in really late, didn't spend that much money, so I wanted to put a real campaign on this time around. Put a little bit more work into it. I think it was proven right because there's no other Democrat stepped up. So why not me?
Was there a second Democrat 2 years ago?
No, there wasn't.
Okay, it's the same kind of similar situation.
Yeah, that motivated me to run last time.
Right, and again, a two-member district. I should note, Brian Savage, the Republican. Brian, you got enough Democratic write-in votes in the primary, so you've got a D and an R by your name.
I do, and
But you haven't changed parties, I assume.
No. Actually, it's the second time in a row that happened.
Oh, is that right?
And it's the people's decision to do that. I don't solicit people to do that, to write me in.
So you had no active campaign to try to get the Democratic nomination?
But I'm very humbled in the fact that they've written me in, and I'll do my best for it.
Right. Yeah. Bob, speaking of parties, again, you're elected 4 times as county sheriff, 5 times?
5 times.
5 times.
Yes.
And of course, ran as a Democrat, as I recall. And you're running now as a Republican. Why the change in party?
Well, first of all, to show my ability to work across party lines here, I guess, Richard. But I thought on January 31st of 2019, after I had retired, that I was pretty much done with the political circus, so to speak. I received a few phone calls, discussed this with my wife. Of course, her father was in the Vermont legislature for 14 years until he passed away. And she supported me in my endeavors, and so here we are.
Interesting. So again, change of party. Why'd you go from a D to an R?
Basically, it was the Republican Party who had contacted me, Richard, and asked if I was interested in running. I was a little hesitant at first. So I don't want to step away from this, but after being in public service for most of my career, most of my life, better than 30 years, I guess it's in the blood, and I decided to step forward and simply give the voters of Sheldon and Swanton an opportunity or a chance, a choice, should we say.
Interesting. So again, longtime former county sheriff, you're a St. Albans City Police officer before that, Bob. Are you still involved in law enforcement these days at all?
I do hold a commission. Basically, after spending an entire career in law enforcement and going through the grueling 15-week academy and the additional training year after year after year, in order to hold on to your certification, you must maintain at least 30 hours of in-service training a year. So until I decided what I wanted to do after retirement, I hated to lose that and start all over again, which I wouldn't have done, obviously. So I simply maintained my 30-plus hours of in-service training, and I was able to convince the department to commission me.
Interesting. Are you any positions in Sheldon? Are you like Justice of the Peace or anything in Sheldon?
Oh, goodness. I have several hats in Sheldon. I'm president of the zoning administrator.
Wow, that's right, ZA. Wow.
Town agent, town juror, Justice of the Peace, and the moderator within Sheldon, yes.
Oh, wow. How long have you been moderator?
I believe this will be my 5th or 6th year coming up, next town meeting.
Oh, sounds like very involved in your hometown.
I try to be,
Interesting. Let's flip over to Nick. Nick, give us some background here. What are you up to? And give us some background on yourself.
Well, currently I can tell you about my main job. I work for Vermont Health Connect in the call center. dealing with issues involving Medicaid and Medicare and getting folks health care. When it comes to my local town offices, I do a lot with the local Franklin County Democrats. I'm their town chair, stuff like that, so I remain active that way. I'm also a Justice of the Peace, and on the Cemetery Commission, which I don't think has had a meeting in several years.
I'm just going to ask you that. Is that right? Not a real active group, huh?
No, I don't think so, but I technically hold that.
Interesting. Brian's certainly active over the years in Swanton Village, a former Swanton Village trustee, of course, among other things.
Right. Actually, I guess for most of my adult life, I've been involved in one board or another. I actually started with the Swanton Zoning Board of Adjustment, and then did take a run and served as a Swanton Village trustee for 15 years. I was the police and fire commissioner for that same length of time. I am the town moderator, though the town moderator in Swanton, since there's no town meeting per se, it's a very easy job. Actually, Bob has to work for his
Bob
job.
actually does some work.
He actually does some. He does it very well. I'm at those meetings.
So literally, as a town moderator, nothing with just all Australian ballot issues.
Right. When there's the informational meeting, I get up and read the warning. That's it. Then I am also on the board of Civil Authority. I have a Justice of the Peace, the Cemetery Commission, along with Nick. We were going to meet, and then, but then COVID happened, and places to find a meeting, of course, are really difficult. And then also, I'm a trustee of public money, and again, we have to meet at some point, but again, being difficult as it is. Plus, I was in the legislature much longer than expected this year. Usually, we would normally adjourn by
May sometime, typically?
May 8th to the 10th, and we didn't get done until September 25th this year.
In fact, hearing from some of your colleagues who I've interviewed earlier, apparently this was the longest session in Vermont history.
I believe it probably was. I mean, I don't know of any that went. I remember former Representative John Winters saying, I remember until we were there 1 year until the end of June. Well, we got that one beat now. And I look back in 1964, I believe, and in the early 60s, they did go until August, and that was the first year they had to reapportion the House. Okay. So I'm sure there was some battles there, but so yeah, I'd say we went the longest.
I should note, I believe you and Lynn Dickinson, the Republican state rep from St. Albans Town, are the two veterans of the Franklin County Legislative Delegation, have served the longest, I believe.
Yeah, it has been, and both came in at the same time. We were sworn in January of 2009, and we've been at it ever since. And we say veteran makes us sound old.
just referring to length of service.
Number of years, right? Yeah.
With the two Republicans here, can I assume you folks are backing Republican Governor Phil Scott for re-election and Scott Milne for lieutenant governor? Would that be accurate?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I'll be backing the two.
That would be correct. Yes.
And I guess Scott Milne happens to be maybe in Swanton as we speak, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm not sure. They were planning on doing some sign waving at 4:30 because it was raining pretty hard. So I'm not sure.
The best day for them.
I'm not sure where they were going to do it, but I didn't see them when I left town. But he was in Franklin County today. He was in St. Albans and went up to Enosburg and Swanton. So,
Nick, over to you. Can I assume you're backing the Democratic candidate for governor, Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman?
Yes, I am.
And Molly Gray for lieutenant governor?
Yeah.
And easy, tough time to be running against a seemingly popular Republican governor, given the strange times with the pandemic. But have you got hope that David Zuckerman might pull an upset here? You think there's a shot?
You never know. He's the underdog.
Yeah.
You never know, though. So we'll see how it bears out.
So what's the biggest issue? I realize you're probably not doing little or maybe no door-to-door campaigning, but you're still talking to whoever you can. What's the biggest issue? Is the pandemic dominate still, or what are you running into on the campaign trail, such as it is?
With folks, I would say education. I hear a lot of things about education, making sure, like I talked to some teachers over the phone. They want to get back to work and get onto a normal schedule. So
Typically, a lot of students going to actual school a couple days a week at this point.
yes, they are, which is understandable. That there needs to be a phased in back to school. It can't be all at once. But so, yeah, that's what I've been hearing, education, talking to folks about healthcare, stuff like the normal issues, but, yeah.
Given your backing of David Zuckerman, do you think Governor Scott and the administration have done a decent job with the pandemic? How would you rate the job they've done?
I would rate it a B+. I would have, if I was Phil Scott, I would have done the mask mandate a little bit earlier. I think his hand was kind of forced because other states and municipalities were doing it. So I kind of thought it was kind of a political decision when he did the mask mandate. But overall, I think he's been doing a good job with the shutdown and getting the economy back up, and yeah.
Brian, I realize you're backing the governor. Any critique at all about how the administration's handled an obviously unprecedented, difficult situation?
Well, it is difficult. I have had people in my district who are not happy with the way he's handled it, only because they said he should have opened everything up because we have so few cases. I'm of the opinion, we have so few cases, which is fortunate, but maybe it's because there was, a shutdown and being very careful. If it was the other way and say we had people dying by a couple of thousand, 3,000-4,000, then who would they be looking to blame? So really, in a job like that, oftentimes you're in a no-win situation, but I think it's the practical thing that he's doing with advice of the Health Commissioner, Dr. Levine, and others. I think they've got a good handle on it. So we just have to stay the course, and hopefully the pandemic will run its course eventually.
Bob, your thoughts? How do you think the governor and the administration have dealt with, again, such a strange, tough situation?
Well, it is a strange and tough situation, and no one could foresee this coming, obviously. I'd have to give the governor and his administration a strong A on the handling of the COVID here within Vermont. Basically, they've been following the science. We have roughly over 1,700 cases in the state of Vermont. Deaths, we may say there's been only 58, but obviously the families of those 58 or whatever certainly are grieving over the loss of them. But I think they followed the science. I think the governor's done a good job. He's going to make decisions, obviously, that not all people are going to agree with. But when Dr. Fauci comes on and says that the United States should use Vermont as a role model for the COVID-19 throughout the United States, I think that says kudos to the governor and his administration.
So give him pretty high marks.
On the COVID issue, yes.
On the COVID issue. Some concerns on other issues?
Well, I've heard other concerns on other issues through constituents and so on and so forth. Even though I haven't been in the House or the Senate for the past 20 years, I've been actively involved throughout the community and listening to folks on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. I had the advantage of being there on a day-to-day basis where we sent our legislators and senators away for 4 or 5, this year it seems like 9 months. But, there was some concern about some bills that he had signed in the past, everything from the one that jumps out at me is the gun regulations.
Sure.
There was a lot of concern here. Of course, Franklin County is highly respected as a sportsman's county, and there's a lot of hunting that takes place within the county. Yeah. And everyone's pretty close to their firearms in Franklin County. So I've heard concerns along the firearms list, yes.
True. Vetoes. The governor certainly has been bashful, Brian, about vetoing legislation. I guess most recently the Act 250 reform bill, such as it was. And you tell me, the taxing, and I guess there are a couple of marijuana bills that passed. Has he made a decision on whether to veto or not veto them? Do you know?
My understanding is they're still on his desk. He's within the time frame.
Boy, doesn't have much more time.
No, he's running out, but he's still weighing the options and looking at them and making considerations. So he has not decided, and that was as of yesterday. And there was nothing new that changed today that I've seen.
Okay, but did veto the Act 250
Right.
reform, which was widely regarded as a real watered-down bill, vetoed earlier the Global Solutions Warming
Right.
Act with, of course, that veto was fairly
Overridden.
easily overridden
Yeah.
before that, the paid family leave. Those vetoes, are you happy with those vetoes or not with some of them?
Yeah, I am. I think I am not against paid family leave. However, the type of bill and the piece and the way the program was going to work, and the fact that they didn't even get an actuary to run the numbers, it was setting up for possibly some very tough going if it didn't work right. So I think, and there would be a large segment of the population paying into it that would never be able to collect from it.
I know he was hoping for a kind of a more voluntary program
Yes, yeah.
tied in with New Hampshire,
Right. Yeah.
which didn't seem, did New Hampshire do anything with that? or-
No, they didn't. I'm not sure what took place there. So a voluntary program and then have an insurance company, in which they would put it out to bid for an insurance company to run it. But if an insurance company didn't bid, the state would run it itself. And I'm of the opinion, if insurance companies, which are in that business, know what they're doing, decided, oh, we don't want to do this, they should take that as a warning and find out why they didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
The other vetoes on the Act 250, it actually made Act 250, in some cases, it was going to make it more stringent.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if we're looking for economic development, and I said this in the County Courier last week or the week before, that before there can be any serious economic development in the state, we have to get Act 250 kind of back to the grassroots of what it was intended to do.
It seems like that issue comes up every election. I'm always
Yeah.
hearing need to streamline the permitting process.
That's right, yeah. And because other states do it, and it's streamlined, and they're not one big parking lot, because I've driven through it. Actually, it's surprising some states I've driven through that I'd expected to see the worst, and they're absolutely beautiful.
Really?
Yeah, so it's it can work if it's done correctly.
Bob, I realize you're at this point an outside observer, but again, on the bills that the governor vetoed, any thoughts on them? It goes for good vetoes. Have you got enough info to comment on any of those?
Well, Act 250 is rather an extensive bill, and I have to familiarize myself much more than what I am now, but I do see that Vermont is not builder-friendly for businesses to come in, and what's happening is the residents that are here presently are absorbing most of the taxes throughout the state of Vermont. As far as the paid family leave, love the concept, not against that whatsoever, but the mechanism to pay for this, such as Representative Savage mentioned, is what's first and foremost in my mind, as to how do we pay for this for those individuals who aren't going to use it. The insurance companies are great ideas. I don't know if the state of Vermont running is a good idea. Like you say, Richard, I'm on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And until I sit down and listen to these discussions and back and forth, I have a better understanding as to what's going on.
Yeah. Have those issues come up much? Have you been asked about some of those issues by some folks, or not too much?
Not too much as of late. And of course,
Yeah.
it's not a good year for getting out and
Right.
talking to people this year, but
How's
no.
that with your extensive law enforcement background? Talk about the marijuana. Of course, Vermont had legalized marijuana, kind of a strange law. Okay to possess some of it, but don't try to buy it from somebody. Were you unhappy that Vermont just even made that initial step a few years ago, or what are your thoughts on marijuana?
The decriminalization of marijuana is one bill in itself when that happened, okay? So law enforcement will learn to live with that. The biggest problem I have with legalization of marijuana is, first of all, I was against it. And we had medical professionals, educational professionals, law enforcement professionals come in and testify in Montpelier against the bill. And for whatever reason, they went off and made their own decision as to how it should have been done. My biggest concern was that I didn't think that 180 people should have been making that decision for the entire state of Vermont. I thought that it should have went to the voters, and I could have lived with that decision much easier than what I could just having 180 people do that for me. And basically, the only reason that you don't put it to the voters is you're afraid you'd lose. So I thought that there was, in Vermont at the time, I believe, was the first state to actually pass that law without putting it to the voters. Even Colorado put it to the voters. So I thought that was kind of short-sighted as far as them not, it was a presidential year, that election that year, I believe. So I thought that was a perfect opportunity to get the true reading on what Vermonters thought about the legalization of cannabis.
Nick, what about, something tells me you may feel differently about this, but again, governor's not been bashful about vetoing the bills I mentioned. Were those good? Were you happy with those bills?
Well, marijuana legalization, that debate's over. It's legalized. So now it's like we're trying to create the system.
Right.
It seems like the biggest contention with the governor is the warrantless, whether or not the police need to get a warrant over whether or not they can do a saliva test.
Just the impaired driver issue has been certainly a concern to him.
Yeah, yes. Which I can see the civil liberties aspect of it. Like you should probably get a warrant if you're taking someone's saliva. I'm more supportive of that. So I would be fine with that in the bill. I'm overall supportive of the bill. Also, there is local options in that bill. Not every municipality has a choice whether or not they choose to sell marijuana in their local town. So it does give local choice. I'm overall supportive of the bill.
What about paid family leave?
I am supportive of that bill as well. I think the employee contribution is the way it should be funded. I don't think some program where we are dependent on New Hampshire is a wise idea. I don't want our paid family leave program to be dependent on the wills of another state. So I'm very supportive of the paid family leave bill. The Act 250 bill, seen by the time it got to the governor's desk, was really limited. There's only to forestation fragmentation and some trail regulation, which and he put some of the bill he already agreed with some of the bill by doing it through an executive order. So I believe I would be supportive of all those bills.
And Global Solutions Warming Act, you were comfortable with that
yes,
bill?
I did. I wrote a letter to the editor about it.
Yeah.
I believe that if we're serious about tackling global warming, then we should be not that worried about a lawsuit. So coming from various groups. So if we can actually tackle our climate change goals, we shouldn't have anything to worry about.
Yeah. Brian, I'm not sure there are any, maybe there are a few Democrats, but that Global Solutions Warming Act certainly widely supported by Democrats, but in the veto override vote, there were some Republicans who did vote, not to override. We're comfortable, we're supportive of that measure. Not sure how many, but
not many, but
not many. Was it just a few?
In the end, I don't have I can't recall the exact number,
I don't have the.
Yeah, but the only, I do agree that we need to do something with climate change or global warming. I have, and rightfully so, there's serious constitutional issues with that, the makeup of that council, and which the governor has mentioned, and inviting a lawsuit. We take an oath of office, and in that oath it says we shall do no harm. And by passing a bill that invites lawsuits, we're doing harm.
That was certainly one of the biggest criticisms that opponents had of that bill.
And we are also, in the bill, in my estimation, given the 23-member, I believe it's 23-member council, we're abdicating our legislative authority, which should never, ever be done. Very short-sighted.
I should belatedly note that, again, two-member district, one incumbent not running, that's of course Mariana Gamache. And that the only incumbent legislator in Franklin County who's not seeking another running for re-election.
Right, I believe she is,
all other incumbents are seeking another term, so there will be at least one change in the delegation. Swanton, boy, easy to think of Swanton with the border closed. All the traffic on I-99 that typically is heading north through Highgate Springs to Montreal or wherever. Boy, and it sounds like nothing's changing. I guess the border, I think, is officially closed till October 21st, but I'd be real surprised. Sounds like Montreal's going kind of the wrong way with the pandemic.
Right.
I'd be surprised if we see the border opening before the end of the calendar year, and I don't know about after that, but how much of a hit on your district? I mean, certainly that's adversely affected a number of Swanton and, for that matter, some Sheldon businesses
Pretty
to
much
some extent.
all of Franklin County, I would
All of
say,
Franklin County.
would be somewhat affected.
Yeah.
Certainly, I haven't really, it's noticeable. Okay, it's very noticeable, and I don't have exact numbers. I'm sure they will be coming out. I agree with you that it appears that this is probably going to stay closed until probably at least the end of the year.
Yeah, sure sounds like
in
it.
that they're on the uptick, and it's interesting that they're on the uptick when it's not coming from the U.S. Taking a ride. Occasionally, I'll ride up to the border on the interstate, and it's a very strange experience because you're the only car on the highway. And it's and occasionally there may be a Canadian car that'll come down through, but they could be working at one of the hospitals.
Right, essential
Yeah.
folks in essential jobs can
And
still go back.
of course, the tractor trailers go across,
Right.
but it's very weird. And then taking this summer, driving around the second home and summer camp areas in the area, that was it was like a ghost town. It was, they're hard hit. And but they all maintained the lawns are all mowed that I could see, and they had to hire people to mow their lawns for them and whatnot.
And certainly a hardship for, X number of people who have family north of the border and vice versa. Just, I know folks who have second homes in Franklin County who obviously haven't been down here for, half a year or more. It's a
Right.
tough
Right.
situation.
A very tough situation.
Bob, do you hear about that from some of your would-be constituents? Does the border issue come up sometimes?
Well, the border issues come up for some individuals. I know a lot of folks that go up there for recreational purposes, be it hunting, fishing, just going to the local restaurants, the Chinese foods, whatever else, along with myself included. Used to go out and buy some lumber up there every now and then. Good time to go for a ride, take a look at things.
Yeah.
I'm sure it has to be affecting the business both from our northern partners, along with, I know we have a lot of agricultural specialists, AKA farmers, who live on the border and had great access to certain dealerships go across the border. It's become somewhat of a burden for them also. And to turn it around, those Canadian folks used to come down here also. Nice folks. And like I say, the Alberg Passage is just a row of camps owned by Canadians. And it's a ghost town through there now. That has to be affecting our marinas, a lot of our small mom and pop stores. So it's both sides of the border that are feeling the hurt.
Of course, Jay Peak, not in your district, but I suspect you've got probably a few constituents who work at places like Jay Peak, and Jay Peak, I think, gets about half its business from Montreal area north of the border. So.
Well, look at the Richford Golf Course.
No, good point.
3/4 of the membership.
Is that right?
Canadian
3/4?
citizens. I mean,
I
that had
suspect
taken a toll.
Enosburg's got probably significant membership from
I'm sure that they do.
Champlain for that matter. Bob. Yeah, that's a good point. Nick, do you hear much about just the border shutdown? Does that come up much?
A little bit. The root of the matter is the COVID situation. Without that being solved, the border there's going to be controls on the border.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a federal solution to the COVID situation that makes an impact on the numbers we have in this country, which has just been steadily going up and up.
Yeah. I know the governor was asked about that issue at his news conference yesterday, his Tuesday news conference, and he was quick to say, hey, I'm not the one who controls whether the border is open or not.
Yeah, Vermont can play its part, of course, but there needs to be a countrywide solution.
Right.
Yeah.
Casualties in your would-be district, have you talked to some of the folks who are either out of work or their business closed down? I mean, obviously there's been significant impacts all over.
It's affected me personally. It's affected a lot of people I know.
Can you talk about
And the disease has too.
Can you talk about yourself? How has it affected you?
Just
Can you talk
my
about
work
that?
situation. Just half my office is most of us are working remotely.
Really?
I'm still coming in for personal reasons. I worked through the whole pandemic. I had some dental issues during that time period, which was really hard to take care of when I was both working, and so it's affected me. Some people I know have actually gotten the coronavirus. So so I can see it from that point, and I can see it from how it can affect people economically as well.
Right. Boy, tough issue. Of course, Lake Champlain, part of, right on the western edge of your district, Lake Champlain, water quality issues. Lake Carmi even seemed to supplant Missisquoi Bay is kind of the poster child for water quality issues, but a huge issue for years in Vermont. Do you think the state's doing enough? Are you comfortable with funding's been a big question mark?
I like the bill that was passed last year.
Yeah.
I think it's a good bill. Puts a lot of funding towards the lake, and the funding for it's gonna go over time with that. I believe how the bill is designed. So yes, I think they did a lot last year. I think tackling global warming, putting more supporting the Global Warming Solutions Act, making sure we get serious about tackling climate change is the next step towards helping the lake.
Of course, the low lake level getting a fair amount of attention. I know Messenger's had, I think, a couple of stories on Maquam Bay, just low lake level and just some shoreline issues there. But anyway, Brian, you're hearing from some folks on the lake. I know Maquam Bay in particular has had some attention just with low lake level, weeds, smells, stuff like that.
Yeah, I have spoken to several people. It is, of course, a concern, certainly. However, what we have last heard was the EPA, the water quality people were happy with the progress that was being made, so that's a good sign. That, of course, was last winter, so we haven't heard anything from them since. Not saying that maybe they haven't reported, but remember, we were working remotely, and so the flow of information was difficult at best to get in a timely manner. But it is still a very serious concern, and it didn't get that way overnight. It's not going to clean up overnight neither, so
for sure.
It'll take a while.
The funding issue, that was kind of a big question mark for years, but I guess there is a formula now. Is there some dedicated funding there?
There is a formula. It is dedicated funding, so much per year, and it goes up a little bit each year, and so that's the formula, so that over the course of the period of time, they hopefully it'll be enough, and we'll see what kind of progress will be made. Now, if there was when that was being discussed, I don't have a problem with that. I voted for it. But I said we need to establish and take a look and make sure that we're getting what we're paying for. Check it every 5 years, and if there's not enough progress being made, then what are we doing? Because I've heard from the other side of local people who are much smarter on these matters than I am, and they say it's just the lake is dying. It's just a natural event.
Huh,
so I don't know. I'm not of a scientific mind to figure that one out, but hopefully that's not the case. So we just have to see what's going on. And I still get very concerned when I hear of municipalities that need to do some changes, some improvements to their sewer system.
As in I think a fairly recent state law mandate, whatever, on just reducing phosphorus levels.
Right, but
and of course, sewage treatment plants seem to be a very small part of the overall problem, I believe.
It is, but when you
not to say there shouldn't be such initiatives, but
when you have millions of gallons of raw sewage being dumped because of a malfunction, that is definitely sending the wrong signal.
Yeah, Burlington in particular seems to have had some problems on that issue, and St. Albans from time to time as well.
Right.
Bobby, Lake Champlain, you run into people talk Lake Champlain water quality issues once in a while?
Well, first of all, I must say that 1.2 million gallons of raw sewage dumping into the lake sounds kind of nasty to me. I know it's probably the smaller of the many problems that we have, but that's still not a good thing. We presently have a camp on Lake Carmi.
Okay.
And I think the only distinction between Lake Champlain and Lake Carmi is they both have water and they're both called lakes. Lake Carmi is something that's surrounded by the town of Franklin. Mm-hmm. And they've installed aeration systems throughout the lake. We've been there for 11 years now, so we have seen the worst of Lake Carmi, I might add. But I believe this is the second year running now, and like Representative Savage says, for something that took several decades, even 100 years, to get to where it is today, we're not going to relieve that problem overnight, obviously. We have seen, in my opinion, a difference in what's happening on Lake Carmel. This year was much better in years past. So we're hoping that that's working. We're hoping that the efforts continue. Getting into Lake Champlain, I spent a lot of time on Lake Champlain also. And the problem there is it's nothing that Vermont can address by themselves, obviously, because of our Canadian partners, because of our New York constituents, because of the international waters that run through Lake Champlain. We can dump all the money we want, but unless we have a joint committee or team from the country and the state of New York, we're not going to solve the problems in Lake Champlain, if at all, if we can, I might add.
Well, I'm going back some years, but it was a big issue at the time when finally we got a new Missisquoi Bay Bridge connecting West Swanton and East Alberg. But at the time, there was a push by certainly some folks to remove the old causeway. Concern being that there was so little, kind of water flow action into Missisquoi Bay. Boy, I'm not sure. It seems like I'm the only person. I ask that question once in a while when I talk to Swanton folks. Is that issue? I think the IJC, International Joint Commission, I think even gave that issue some attention, but I've heard nothing. Do you ever hear anything about the causeway these days?
I have not heard any more about it, and for a number of years, but it's definitely, the causeway is still there, and I think, of course, the whole issue was over habitat for turtles.
Right, the spiny soft-shell turtles.
Yeah. And so that, whether they're still there or not, I would assume they are. But I think, at some point, they probably should seriously consider pulling out a good share of that causeway, and I think the turtles would migrate to where they would have another habitat.
Nick, you hear anything about it? Anybody ever ask you about that issue?
No, I haven't heard of that.
Hasn't come up?
No.
Anyway. Give you the chance to mention this, I think, just before we got started. Have you got to let you ask a question to one of these folks if you want? Any question you want to ask either Brian or Bob?
Sure. Can I address them to both?
Yeah. I think
Sure.
so.
Well, a big issue I'm running on is healthcare reform. What I've seen how private health insurance, people getting at work, getting their coverage canceled, how that can affect their livelihoods. What is your plan to reduce the cost of health insurance costs in Vermont?
Brian, you want to take a stab at that first?
I think probably, and I've said this before, Vermont should get out of healthcare and just open it up to the market. And I think overall, you would see, it seems like every time that we go to improve it, it comes out worse. And this has been going on for years. Single payer on a statewide basis is not going to work.
Former Governor Shumlin didn't fare too well with that.
No, and he himself admitted it would be too expensive.
Yeah.
If you're going to have single payer, it has to be at the national level. And whether advocate, and there would be a debate for another time. But I think some of the problem with healthcare is that we pay for everything on the community rating. We only have two or three insurance companies you can buy from. Yet you can go out and buy your homeowner's insurance, your car insurance across state lines. That's fine, but you can't your health insurance. Yet if you work for a company that is based in another state, you can be on that state's health plan. So this is really, as I said, the more they work at it, the worse it gets. I think we should just try my approach. Just forget it and let the market take it and go from there and see what happens.
Bob, any thoughts?
Well, the only thought I have on that is it appears that, of course, Vermont's population is roughly 625,000 people, give or take. The census has it yet, but
Not going anywhere either.
with that population, okay, we need to open up, like Representative Savage says, we need to open up healthcare to other interested parties. But because of the size of the population of the state of Vermont, it's my understanding they're just not interested in coming into Vermont and bidding on these systems when we have municipalities throughout the United States that have far bigger populations than the entire state of Vermont. So the problem is we can't find enough healthcare providers to come in to bid on healthcare coverage that we need. That's my understanding of it.
Well, that is correct, but the reason for that is because Vermont, under the Dean administration, came out with what was known as the community rating. Prior to that, we had something like 34 insurance companies writing policies in Vermont, and now it's gone down. So that's where you're paying for everything.
There you go.
Okay, my wife and I will never have any more children. We're past the age. Probably you are.
You hadn't had enough kids, you think?
Yeah. But in our premiums, we're paying for that. So everybody is covered. That's the community rating, anyhow.
Nick, what about yourself? Single payer? Have you got?
I'm a supporter of working towards a public option in Vermont, trying to have a public option compete with the private health insurance companies, give people a choice. I've seen the outcomes that Vermont Medicaid has provided people. It's one of the better insurance options in the state. I would rather have Vermont Medicaid than a third-tier bronze plan with a $10,000 deductible that no one can afford. So I've backed publicly funded health insurance. I'm a big supporter of it.
Have you got a question for Nick, or for that matter, Bob, Brian? You don't have to. Have you any question you want to throw out?
No, there's one a couple of years ago, and we had a similar get-together here, and I just wondered if your position on gun control legislation had changed at all in the last couple of years.
I'm a supporter of the legislation that was passed. Reducing the clip size, the background checks. I'm a supporter of that. I'm a supporter of a 24-hour waiting period for guns. I think it could prevent. I think it can prevent suicides and be helpful towards people.
And that was the governor vetoed that particular.
The governor vetoed that particular one. I'm not a big supporter of moving any more forward on gun legislation. Like I don't want assault weapons banned or limiting people's right to guns. So I'm kind of midstream, I think, on the issue. I don't think it's an issue a lot of people are caring about, but I am a little bit more. I don't think it's an issue that we're going to be addressing anytime soon, except for maybe that 24-hour waiting period.
Bob, any question for Nick or Brian?
Well, Representative Savage stole my thunder here. Of course, being a law enforcement officer for the better part of my career, along with it. Now, I'm not necessarily a gun enthusiast, but I am a hunter. I haven't been for all my life here. And I was going to ask Mr. Brousseau his thoughts on gun control and the Second Amendment, but I guess we've covered that already. And he's answered my question satisfactorily, so I thank him for that.
What about the 24-hour waiting period? Brian, again, the governor vetoed that. Were you happy with that veto of that provision or bill?
I was. I think the 24-hour waiting period I was not in favor of to begin with. I think if they get the background check and everything is in order, and as far as the suicide prevention, and suicide is a serious problem, but I'm not sure exactly. And we asked for numbers of the number of suicides in the state and how many are actually committed with a gun. And the number was quite low, as I recall. So I was happy with that veto. I think if somebody's life is threatened and a serious, it's taken seriously, and they're advised to go buy a gun, they need to buy that gun and get some quick training on how to safely handle it if they haven't ever handled a gun, and to delay 24 hours could impede their safety.
Bob, what about the 24-hour waiting period?
I've heard arguments on both sides as far as the 24-hour period is good versus not so good. Going along with what Representative Savage says, I don't know, we just pull a number out of our hat and say, okay, this is what we need. I agree with the background checks and so on and so forth. And once they pass that, they should be eligible to purchase a firearm. However, I have heard about the 24-hour rule as far as, well, people are very emotionally distraught and so on and so forth. Had to wait that 24 hours. This might not have happened. And quite possibly it might not have, but there's no guarantee. And I have heard the other side of the coin where someone's life was threatened domestically or whatever else, and they went to purchase a firearm, and it wasn't in Vermont, obviously. And because of the 24-hour rule, I remember they were seriously injured anyways, but they were not allowed to have a firearm for their protection. So I guess depending on who you talk to and what day of the week it is, they're both very serious issues, don't get me wrong. But I'd have to look into it more to see the benefits. And some people say, well, the benefit's quite obvious. I mean, we saved somebody's life here. And that may be. So it's a very volatile issue.
Well, law enforcement, it's been, I mean, what a year. There have been some, with racial unrest, there have been issues, a ton of publicity across the country. Maybe not so much in Vermont, although certainly the Burlington Battery Park protests getting a lot of attention. But any thoughts on a huge subject? Some sympathy, again, Vermont's such a white state, but sympathetic to some extent to the Black Lives Matter folks, or any thoughts on an admittedly huge issue out there?
Well, it's funny you should bring that up, Richard. Somehow I thought you would.
Yeah.
As a law enforcement officer for many years, obviously I've taken an oath to uphold the United States Constitution. And the First Amendment gives an individual, a group, or an affiliation the right to go out and protest as they see fit. And I don't have a problem with that. I support that Constitution. I support that right. My concern is when a group or an affiliation turns the peaceful protest into what I refer to as riotous acts. I'm sorry, but when you start breaking windows, burning police cars, shooting the public, shooting police officers, and I'm not saying any particular affiliation is doing that, but what I'm seeing is these groups that are protesting, this is what I'm seeing. Seattle will be probably the biggest example. Minneapolis is coming back now and saying, maybe we hurried into this. Maybe we should, as far as defunding the police, maybe we should back up on this a little bit here.
Yeah, as part of this, of course, those talking about defunding police.
Right. Well, I can tell you that I'm not in favor of defunding the police, obviously. That comes no surprise to you.
Yeah.
I think that if municipalities have to look at their budgets because of fiscal constraints, they should do just that. But police personnel should be treated the same as all emergency personnel. Firemen, EMS, we're emergency providers.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of short-sighted to pick one of the three, or if not more, and say that these are the people to blame. Now, the law enforcement profession is not perfect. And if someone could tell me which profession is, I'd like to hear about that. We have problems. But I can assure you that there's many men and women who go to work, don their pants the same way that everybody else does, puts on that badge and bulletproof vest, and straps on a firearm and goes out and does those jobs that no one else wants to do. And we should be thanking these people for putting their lives on the line, because they need to come back to their families also. And their families expect them to come back to them. So my thought on that is I support the Constitution, I support the right to protest, and I also support our local police.
Brian, is that issue getting some of your attention? As some folks mentioned that issue to you, Swanton's had some kind of minor issues. I know with the mural situation in Swanton Village.
Yeah, they have
generated
had
a bit of controversy.
They did, but the question of the police, to the best of my knowledge, never came up.
Yeah.
I think
It didn't seem to be a police issue.
It was not a police issue. And those who as I said earlier, I spent 15 years as a village trustee, and in that job I was the police and fire commissioner. And under the charter at that time that we were operating under, the police chief reported to me, not the village manager. And so I would invite anyone to, as I did, spend a shift with an officer on a regular basis and see what they have to put up with. Some nights or days are pretty boring, and others you really wonder. And so it's not an easy job. So that question never came up through any of the controversy in Swanton that I was aware of. And I agree with what Bob has said. not every police officer is perfect. Some will make an error in judgment, or sometimes in the hiring process, somebody got hired that probably shouldn't have been hired. And there's processes in place that those situations will be taken care of.
Yeah. Nick, you want to jump into this issue with any thoughts?
Sure. I think that I'm supportive of to a degree, I'm supportive of the Black Lives Matter cause. I think there is too much police violence in this country compared to other countries. There's too much use of force. And I think the amount of guns and the amount of legal guns in this country have a lot to do with that. I'm supportive of, I'm supportive of the police, but I don't think that we should be scared of common sense reforms. I'm a big supporter of police advisory committees, local towns giving feedback on how their police are in the community. I'm a big supporter of the bills that were recently passed, mandating body cameras, looking at the use of reforming the use of force policy. Our police are great. I love our police in Franklin County, but there's definitely reforms and things we can do to improve our police force.
Yeah. Bob, on body cameras, I believe VSP, Vermont State Police, are going that route, I believe, when they get enough funding for body cameras.
That's what
Good initiative. You think that's a good move?
Well, I do, because we had the body cameras at the Franklin County Sheriff's Office.
Really? So you've had, the Sheriff's Department's had that for some time?
We have in Franklin County, yes. We had the monitoring cameras within the cars, and we had the body cameras, along with state-of-the-art technology. Whatever was available at the time, the deputies received that. Yes.
Yeah. Body cameras, Brian, is that a good move?
Yes, definitely. Swanton PD has had body cameras for some time as well. No, I think it was a good move. I fully supported that. That certainly is that was basically a no-brainer.
Right. Yeah. I guess one of your last moves before you folks finally adjourned passing the big budget, I guess basically the last 9 months of the fiscal 2021 budget. Was that effectively what you folks did? You had basically had funding for the first 3 months early?
Yeah, we passed initially. This is very convoluted, but I'll try to.
You don't have to go into it.
But initially, we passed the budget for the entire fiscal year, but we only funded 3 months. So then we went back and restated the budget. Basically, we didn't call it a budget adjustment, but that's what it was. Restated a new amount, and then fully funded it through the entire fiscal year. And it was all lumped in. We added a lot of stuff in there, but it all came out in the end. I think everybody did very good work under the circumstances. And trying to do the legislation by Zoom is horrible.
Doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
And
and of course, that's what you were doing. You haven't met at the State House altogether since March, correct?
That's correct. And actually, I've got to go down there. It'll probably be next week now. I've got to go down there and clean out my desk.
So they'll let you in, I trust?
Oh, yeah. My key will work to get in. And, but the rooms that I have to go into may have to unlock. So I'll make an appointment to go in.
Really? So for the record, not open to the pub. Folks can't just walk into the State House now.
No, it's closed to the public. And but there are some staff in there working.
Yeah.
And so I've got to pick a day and then go down and do that. Yeah.
Well, what I'm hearing again from some of your colleagues is that as difficult as this year might have been budget-wise, the next year's budget, FY 2022, just may be extremely difficult and a lot tougher, with obviously a lot of uncertainty hanging over it.
Yeah, it's going to definitely be tougher. We don't know. Right now, the revenue looks pretty good. The thing is that since they had delayed the tax collections to July 15th, like to coincide with the IRS, so that really bumped the numbers up for those months. And but you can't take just that bit of months and then figure, oh, the rest of the year will be fine. The thing is, we don't know.
Yeah.
We're going to have to really take a look at that. So it's going to be a challenge, and definitely.
And higher taxes, if not inevitable, certainly a possibility, or just hard to say?
It's hard to say. I mean, in the education fund, we're running a deficit and been paying it back each year. So in the words of some members of the House Education Committees, and next year on town meeting day is going to be really interesting. So it's what we're going to have to see going forward, what things look like.
Yeah. Bob, realizing you're on the outside now, any thoughts on the budget? I realize this. You weren't one of the folks dealing with this, but again, it sounds like if you head to Montpelier, it sounds like you're going to have some pretty serious budget work to do.
Well, given that opportunity, I'll probably have more thoughts on the budget, obviously.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's a mess.
Nick, any thoughts on your end, outside observer?
I was impressed with the budget this year.
Yeah.
It seems like a fiscal surplus came at the right time. They were able to do state bridge funding for State College. They were able to do a stimulus payment for everybody that was left out of the stimulus on the federal level. So I think I was really impressed with the budget that was passed this year.
The governor certainly made it clear that the thought of higher taxes certainly seems to be anathema to him. Do you think there should be more flexibility depending on the needs that Vermonters have, how it plays out, or I guess I suspect you would like to not see higher taxes?
I would not like to see higher taxes. I would rather raise revenue on the wealthiest Vermonters rather than cut essential services which I see can help people, working class Vermonters, out every day. So if raising revenue is the only option except for cutting essential services, then I'm going to support raising revenue.
Right. Just quickly, boy, campaigning. Brian, you're again, you've done this many times. Nothing like this. I mean, just no door-to-door campaign. Is this like the first joint forum you folks have had even?
It is. Yeah.
Is that right? So just a real different year.
It's a very different year. No door-to-door, no really public events to go to, like field days and dairy festivals and things of that nature. So a lot of it is by social media and phone calls, and then going in and seeing people if you're on the street. But even then, people don't want to really get too close, and it's difficult to have a conversation.
Yeah, and Bob, again, you picked an interesting time to take a stab at the legislature, but kind of a strange time. Tough to do kind of regular campaigning. Not impossible, huh?
It's not impossible. Actually, I found it somewhat intriguing.
Really?
2 townships versus 15 as I have for the past 20 years. So that kind of made things a little easier for me. And it's unfortunate that we haven't been able to get out and have these forums and talk to folks and whatever else. All parties sitting here, but we'll get through it.
Yeah. And Nick, you've done what you
I've
could
done what
do.
I can. I've been calling people. That's the best way to communicate with people, since you don't talk to them in person.
Yeah.
I've been getting my mail out. I've been texting people. So I've been trying to find every way to campaign that doesn't involve being near people.
Very good. I'll give you another 30 seconds or so. Just quickly, concisely make your case for why you should go to Montpelier.
If you want a progressive voice in Montpelier, if you want somebody that's going to affect change, if you want somebody that's going to pass legislation like paid family leave, work on more universal health care, if you want fresh voice, vote for Nick Brousseau.
Very good. Brian, you got to give you 45 seconds or so, 30 seconds.
Well, all I can say is we're in challenging times that are going to continue, as we've just said. And I think I have the depth and the experience now after being there for the number of years that I have been, and the knowledge and the workings of the legislature and the contacts and whatnot, that we're in there to serve the people, and I think that's a valuable experience, and so I'm looking forward to another term.
Bob, first-time legislative candidate, but no stranger to seeking public office in Franklin County.
Certainly a different career path. My name is Robert W. Norris, as it appears on the ballot. I'm a Franklin County resident all my life. Married to the same woman for 43 years, Libby. Have 4 great children, 9 beautiful grandchildren. I'm running as a fiscal conservative. I ask that you consider checking that box for me, either when you send in your ballots or come directly to Vote Live. So thank you very much. I respect Mr. Brousseau's opinions. I wish you well in the campaign here. Thank you.
Thank you, and I do too.
Well, on that positive note, again, the candidates in the Franklin 4 House District, Nick Brousseau, a Democratic candidate from Swanton, Representative Brian Savage, a Swanton Republican, also with the Democratic nomination, and Republican candidate Bob Norris, a former Franklin County Sheriff from Sheldon. Thanks for the time, folks. I appreciate that. Again, folks, November 3rd, you can vote basically from now to November 3rd. Election day is not far away, so I hope people will take this seriously, but I appreciate the time for all the candidates.